What is up? What is up, YouTube? How y'all doing? Hey, check it out, man. Before we get started, I'm in the Philippines, y'all, working hard. I'm the only one working. My team ain't doing nothing. Uncle Mike be lying, y'all. I be lying, y'all know. Hey, watch this, y'all. Watch this. Still out here going hard. Man. Hey, look here. Hey, buddy. I'm a YouTube blogger. Yeah. There you go. Hey, look, this is my team. They gave up. This is my team. The team I gave. Hey, YouTube blogger. Look. Hey, thank you, buddy. Thank you. YouTube blogger. My team gave up. This is my team right here. See how much work they doing? Look how much work they doing. That's the team. One of them holding the camera. Hey, I'm a YouTube blogger. Check out my YouTube channel. Thank you. Check out my YouTube channel. Thank you, buddy. YouTube. Thank you. Alrighty. Check out my YouTube channel, bro. YouTube. Thank you, buddy. Yeah. Look how many I got. This is my team right here. Team ain't doing nothing. That's my team. Hey, check out my YouTube channel. I'm a YouTube blogger. Look, this is my team right here. That's my team. Look how much work they doing. I'm doing all the work. They ain't doing no work. They ain't doing no work. Man, Uncle Mike lied. We sat there. We was waiting on everybody else, and they was tired. They did a good job. They did a great job, man. My team, my little nieces and nephews and cousins, uncles, and all of them. They did a real good job, man. They was taking a rest. So while they was sitting there, I said, y'all sit here and rest for a minute, because it's kind of hot out there, right? And I said, I turned the camera on and said, look, they ain't working. I'm doing all the work by myself. They not working, y'all. You know, Uncle Mike sitting over there lying. You know how people do, try to act like they doing everything by themselves. Nah, man, they did an excellent job. They did great. I couldn't ask for any more than what they did. They kids, they young. That camera's heavy, man. That camera kind of heavy. They was holding the camera. They taking turns holding the camera, and it was like it's 9 of them, man. So imagine 9 people passing out flyers compared to just me passing out the flyers. People want to know how to do a YouTube channel. It's called work, man. It's called work. You got to put in the work. If you don't put in the work, we did 4 or 5 days of passing out flyers and stuff. But anyway, let's get with this video, man. I just wanted to show y'all that and share some of the things that I'm doing in the Philippines, man. Thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for hitting that subscribe button. Thank y'all for hitting that bell, because y'all know Uncle Mike work hard, baby. I puts it in, baby. That's what I do. You know, it ain't no shame in my game. You can't throw no hate Uncle Mike's way, man. I'm paying him. I fed him food. You know, I try my best to do right, man. I try my best to do right. Now I'm back to doing wrong. P. Diddy. One more day and his trial is about to start, okay? One more day and his trial is about to start. All evidence found in P. Diddy's mansion raid. 1,000 baby oil, 1,000 bottles of baby oil, 1,000 bottles of baby oil. They take one down, pass it around, and put horse tranquilizer all in and stuff. It's a good way to cut. The horse tranquilizer is a good way to cut the horse tranquilizer. That's why he got so many daggone bottles. Don't act so stupid and don't act like you swallow. I couldn't find a rhyming word, but anyway, man, y'all hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. Hey, let's check this bad boy. Yeah.
Because I want to know right now that the feds have. Remember when 1,000 bottles of lube and baby oil were found in P. Diddy's homes? Well, I haven't forgotten, and neither have prosecutors. We're taking a look at the evidence against P. Diddy and what we could expect to see at his coming trial. This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm 𝗟𝗚𝗡𝗞𝗦.
Hey, Miss Gillespie.
1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. You guys. Oh my God, this made headlines. And honestly, rightfully so. It's been months since we found out about all of this. I still am not over it. So much so that I did a quick little Google search. So searched baby oil, and we just used Target as the example, okay? So according to Target, a bottle of baby oil, Johnson & Johnson, trusted product, $6.99 per bottle, okay? And then lube, also from Target, I just looked up Astroglide, okay? It's $11.69 per bottle. So let's say, for sake of argument, we're getting 500 bottles of baby oil and 500 bottles of lube. That is a grand total of $9,340 worth of baby oil and lube. I'm just gonna round up and say that's nearly $10,000 worth of baby oil and lube. And by the way, that's not all the feds collected. They also gathered electronic files, narcotics, AR-15 guns, some with the serial number scratched off, ammunition, a drug magazine. I mean, a lot going on, and I want to go through all of it. But first, want to note really quick, P. Diddy has not been convicted. He's denied all of the allegations against him, and in fact has pleaded not guilty. And the reason we're talking about this story right now is...
Before we get into all that, man, you have to cut this horse tranquilizer. You have to cut this drug that they use. You have to cut it with something. And you gotta you can't put it on your skin and just rub it on your skin. It'll burn right through. It's too potent. It's too potent, y'all. That's why they put it, you gotta have a balance with the baby oil. So you put a little teeny weedy bit in all that baby oil, and then you gotta blend it up. So that's what the baby oil is used for. Duh. Don't nobody know that part. For some reason, nobody is even. That's why he had to buy a sugar load of baby oil, because you need to take all the baby oil, put it in a machine, mix it up with something, and then put it back in the bottle. That way, when you squirt it on people, yeah, they get busy. They get busy, baby. Uncle Mike, you acting like you've been at one of the parties. No, haven't been in one of the parties. I wish I did, though. That I could see for firsthand, I'd have been getting up out of there.
Is because the trial date is looming. May 5th, next Monday. 5th. That's jury selection. And May 12th is when we can expect opening statements.
Today is May 5th.
And for that, the openings and then later the case in chief from the prosecution, I'm really interested in what sort of evidence we're going to see. So let's focus on what we know right now that the feds have. This dates back to March 2024, when those federal search warrants were executed on 2 of Diddy's properties. So one in Miami, Florida, and then one in Holmby Hills, California. What did they collect? Well, it was kind of unclear at the time. We speculated that it was electronic files, which we've now confirmed. However, September 2024, when P. Diddy was indicted, we learned a little bit more. When the indictment came down, not only did we learn what the feds had collected, at least in part, we also learned the charges that Diddy faced: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. And again, Diddy's pleaded not guilty and denies those allegations. But this indictment, this OG indictment, which by the way, there's been a couple of superseding ones, adding a couple of charges here and there. Anyway, going back to the holy grail of it all, the original indictment, that's where we learned about what was collected, including all of that lube and baby oil. And all of this leads us straight back to the freak-offs and the civil cases that preceded the federal search warrants and then eventually the indictment. So Cassie, I know I talk about Cassie all the time, but we wouldn't be here were it not for Cassie. And Cassie's lawsuit is the one that first mentioned freak-offs. We heard about them again from Lil Rod. We've seen them in multiple different civil suits now. And additionally, in the federal indictment. And here's how the Fed specifically explained freak-offs, quote, "Freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded." Now, they also listed a couple of items that were used during these freak-offs, at least according to the feds. They said that there were controlled substances used, and this was specifically to allegedly keep the victims obedient and compliant. The feds also state that during these freak-off situations, recording devices were used. Now, sometimes the people involved in the freak-offs, allegedly, didn't know that they were being recorded. And then other times, Diddy and his team, allegedly, would use these recordings as revenge porn and say, hey, if you come forward and report this to anyone, we've got this really embarrassing video. Why would you do that? So that's an allegation too. The feds also say that IV fluids were used in all of this, specifically because the people involved in the freak-offs had to recover from physical exertion and drug use. Now, according to the indictment, Diddy's employees facilitated these freak-offs. And according to the feds, here's what they had to do. Book the hotel rooms, coordinate transportation, which, by the way, includes some of that prostitution crossing state line situation because allegedly some of these people were sex workers. These employees of Diddy were also required to provide this baby oil and lube, extra linens at the hotel room or wherever they were, lighting, which I thought was interesting to note that they had to provide the lighting, controlled substances, as we've talked about, cash to pay the sex workers, IV fluids, which we've also talked about, and they were then required to clean up the hotel room after. Now, according to the indictment, in or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. And the indictment talks a lot about this alleged Combs enterprise, which was the associates that went along with Diddy and his employees. And they allegedly, according to the federal indictment, engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other activities, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, coercion and enticement to engage in prostitution, narcotics offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. And also of note, the feds point out that these people, these Combs Enterprise employees or associates, sometimes allegedly would carry weapons with them to either intimidate or threaten some of the survivors in this case. This is back to the indictment quote. In or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, as well as a drum magazine. Now, when I read that, I didn't quite know what a drum magazine was. I'm not a big gun girl. However, thank you to Boss Bobby for explaining this one to me. A drum magazine holds a large number of rounds. So we're talking between 50, 100, sometimes more rounds of ammunition, and it's shaped like a drum. So that's how we get the name. Now, those are the things we know the feds have. However, there's a great possibility that there's more stuff they collected too, and it could come out at trial. That's what I want to talk about right now. All right, let's bring on today's guest. It's Tracy Walder, a friend of Scandal, former FBI agent and CIA officer. Tracy, it's always a pleasure when we get to talk. Thank you again for coming on. And I wanted to talk to you because you're the expert in all of this, talking about federal search warrants that were executed on 2 of Diddy's properties. I'm wondering about all of that. What did that look like way back when that happened, more than a year ago?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sierra. And that was actually the biggest question that I got the most was why was he not immediately arrested, right, upon execution of those search warrants? That, I would say 9 times out of 10, that was the question everyone had. They had enough information that there was obviously an imminent threat or that evidence was going to be destroyed to execute that search warrant. I think the biggest thing that they obtained, and I've always said this, is digital. Digital. Yes, we've heard about, all of the bottles of lubricant and all of that, the baby oil, and that's sensational, right? I get that. That sort of has that wow factor to it. But in my opinion, the treasure trove of evidence is going to be in the digital. And I think that's probably what they were attempting to preserve in the execution of the search warrant. That's why you see holes in walls. That's why you see, couches taken apart, right? In the video cam footage that we saw, is because they were looking, listen, you could put digital evidence on so many small, flash drives, external drives, those kinds of things. That's what they were looking for.
So do you think it's because there was so much digital evidence that from the time these search warrants were executed, everything was gathered, all of that? It was about 6 months until he was actually indicted. Do you think it's because it took so long to go through all of the evidence they had?
So in all honesty, and I said this also when we talked the first time, 6 months isn't actually that long. So yes, I know that sounds strange to a lot of people because it seems like it. I even said in my interviews, I went back because I was curious what I had estimated, and I said 6 to 10 months. And that is exactly when
you were right.
Yeah, when he was arrested. It's not about being right or wrong. I think a lot of times the public doesn't understand, and that's okay, how long all of this takes. 6 months, I actually thought was on the shorter end, to be totally honest with you, because I think that sheer volume, I mean, you have to remember the entirety of the FBI or even local law enforcement isn't just assigned to the Diddy case, right? They are assigned to many, many other cases, and we only have a finite number of agents, of analysts who can go through these things. And it takes a very, very, very long time. And you are talking about probably 25 years, in my opinion, if not more, of digital evidence. So you're talking probably VCR tapes, right? DVDs. That's all digital evidence too. Then you have to find out who's on the other end of some of these phone calls. That takes time. That takes warrants to get as well. And so I actually think that 6 months is pretty quick, although I understand why people don't necessarily feel that way.
Well, when you talk about it like that, 6 months to go through decades worth of evidence. And when you talked about VCR tapes, like, okay, yeah, that checks out that might have been a pretty quick turnaround for them to go through all of that stuff. And something we've seen in the indictment is they call it electronic files, digital files. But what do we think is on there? I know we can theorize potentially videos of freak-offs, maybe photos, phone calls. What do you think's on there?
So the way that I determine what I think might be on there is obviously looking at the information that was used to arrest him, right? And the charges that he's charged with that we know of at this point, because clearly we don't know everything. And so I think what you mentioned before, you will see, have seen videos of freak-offs. I think also one of the things that they've talked about a lot, and one of the reasons that he was actually denied bail was that they weren't convinced that he wouldn't intimidate future witnesses. They weren't convinced of that, even if he was just relegated to home arrest. I actually think you'll see that as well, or hear that, as well, him intimidating people into either not talking, into destroying evidence. That's something that hasn't been spoken about a lot. So I think you will see the human trafficking or sex trafficking side of this as well, in some of those video files that were kept. But I also think, too, that you will hear that witness tampering side of it, too.
Oh, that's a really good point, because that is the theory the prosecution has put forward, that he recorded all of these things allegedly to use as revenge porn or to hold over them. Don't report me because I have this. And now it's allegedly being used against him. And I guess that kind of leads into my next question, because the jurors and people in the courtroom could actually see some of these things played out, whether they're photos, videos, audio recordings, whatever it is. How does that work? I mean, would they just be played completely raw, or would FBI agents or someone have to go through and blur some things? Or what would it look like when it's actually being presented as evidence?
So a lot of it's going to depend, right, on how open the trial is. You cannot be showing faces of victims in a situation like this. In my opinion, what I think may happen, again, I'm just hypothesizing at this point, they may excuse the jury to another room to view the footage, even with the victims' faces blurred, because really the jury doesn't need to know, to be totally honest with you, who the victims are. They just need to know the acts that are occurring. And if Diddy's on any of those, obviously his face will not be blurred. I think that they will be sent to another room to view any of those videos. I have a hard time believing that they will be played in open court. That's just, again, my opinion, simply because the victims have that full right to privacy. So because even blurring their face, in my opinion, is probably not enough in a circumstance like that. I think they'll blur their face and then limit it to obviously the jury and the attorneys and the judge.
And these allegations are really tough. I mean, we're talking really vulnerable, intimate situations that is reliving trauma, not only for the witnesses on the stand, but to see it again too. So I think you're right. It may be in a separate room where just the jurors see it. I wanted to talk about witness testimony too, because I'm wondering if FBI agents could potentially be called to testify and say, okay, we were in Miami or we were in LA and here's what we found at the home. Do you think we could potentially see that in the prosecution side of things?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we saw that obviously in the Murdaugh trial. I think that was really put on display. Even in the O.J. Simpson case, if you really want to go back that far, they put police officers on the stand. That was a big reason of why they lost, to be honest with you, in the O.J. case. But I do think that Diddy's defense, they're clearly a good defense team, whether I like them or not, for defending him. I would hope that they will try to poke holes in evidence, how evidence was collected, who collected that evidence, how that evidence was logged, and they're going to have to put FBI agents on the stand. That's pretty typical, to be totally honest.
What sort of testimony do you think we could hear from them? I know that you referred to poking holes, and did we do the correct protocol in order for this evidence to be used as part of trial, all of that. But do you think potentially we could hear some more emotional side of things? Like, for instance, what was it like going through and seeing these videos? Or what was it like seeing the sheer amount of lube and baby oil? Could we see anything like that maybe?
I don't personally think so. I've never been asked my feelings as an FBI agent. It sounds awful, but I don't think people care about necessarily like my feelings. If anything, they're going to focus more on witnesses and victims and their feelings. I suspect the FBI testimony will very much just be on evidence handling. They will probably, to be even more specific, call it members of FBI's evidence response team. That is their job, is to catalog and log all of that evidence.
I guess I'm just wondering what it would be like to go in and see. We talk about the baby oil and the lube because that did make headlines. I mean, 1,000 bottles is a vision that we can just picture, like a lot, stacks of all of these things, you know? And I guess that's a question of mine. When I'm thinking of that, I'm thinking, okay, these were obviously used, allegedly, I guess. These were allegedly used for the freak off situations. And I think that's the dots that the prosecution is connecting. I mean, what do you make of all of that? Those 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube?
It's hard because I feel like I am not the best person to answer that question. And let me explain why. Because of the work that I have done, both at the CIA and FBI, I have seen the things that like humans, I don't know, could handle, right? Like seeing some of those things. And so when I hear just about 1,000 bottles of lube, I'm not that bowled over by it, simply because I have really seen some of the worst of humanity. So sometimes my reactions are not what people would deem as appropriate to what they think about seeing that. So I feel terrible that I can't really answer that question. Yes, it's very disturbing, clearly, to think about what some of that was used for. But in my opinion, from an evidence perspective, it's not going to get Diddy convicted. And so I'm more interested. Having 1,000 bottles of lube is weird and gross and all kinds of maybe deviant, but it's not necessarily illegal. And so I'm approaching it from how do I get someone allegedly, who committed these crimes to be convicted to the fullest extent of the law and not repeat these crimes again. And so when I look at those bottles of lubricant, I don't go to, this is something I need to prove my case, if that makes any sense. I understand how that comes off as heartless, and I don't mean it to.
No, I think that in our jobs, yours probably more than mine, but even talking about true crime or murder, sexual assault, sometimes we have to separate ourselves from these things. I was actually talking right before this interview with our technical director, Nick, and saying that people have messaged me and said, you're heartless for all of these things. And we really do sometimes have to separate it because if we thought about the intricacies of all of this, we would have more struggles than we already do. So I'm glad that you pointed that out because maybe people don't recognize that necessarily. And you're right.
Hard. I want these people off the streets. That's what I want. I want what I'm sure everyone else wants. That's my guess, is that everyone else wants that. And that's not heartless. And you're not heartless for probably wanting that too. And so as a result, I need evidence that's going to convict them, or at the CIA, I need evidence that's going to help me stop the next attack. And so I have to almost like push some of that stuff aside if y'all want me to take this person off the streets. And so I think that's what we have to think about.
Yes, exactly. The 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube is weird. It's just weird. 100%. However, having sex is, as long as it's consensual, it's not illegal.
Right.
Exactly. There were a couple of things that were illegal that were collected, though, I will say. We were talking about narcotics. That was one of the things, too. And I know that this can be tricky, especially how they need to be collected and stored because they are illegal items and all of that. What about the drug side of things? Because I know the prosecution has a potential theory that drugs were involved, that some of these people were drugged against their will. So is that an important part of it too?
I think the drugs is an important part. I think, first of all, they would be able to get him on the fact that you cannot have these substances, right? So that's I think, issue number one. But then you want to obviously try to increase those charges. Again, it's about taking a perpetrator off the street for the longest amount of time that you can. And so that, in my opinion, is where this digital evidence will be helpful, because the having the drugs, yes, of course, that's illegal. But the giving them to someone to make them submissive, that's a whole nother level of charging, right? And so that's where, in my opinion, this digital evidence coupled with the drugs may be helpful in that you have people discussing who they're giving them to, ordering them. That's where I think that's going to be helpful. I think that's what happened in the Matthew Perry case as well, is that's how they got those individuals, is through digital evidence.
What about the guns too? Because we talked about the theory that Diddy allegedly would drug the people, but there's also the theory that Diddy or the Combs enterprise would allegedly use these weapons as, threats, I mean, that's just scary for some people to see. And the sheer amount of ammunition, the drum magazine, and then we have AR-15s, and also the serial numbers had been scratched off or defaced in a way, which obviously is a no-no. What do you think about the guns and all of that?
Yeah, that's where they were really able to charge. I mean, multiple other charges too, but you can't do that to the serial numbers, right, of weapons. We know that regardless of whatever state laws are in terms of what you can own and how much you can own and all of that. So that's a federal law. And I believe, like I said earlier, that was a big reason as to why bail was not made in his case. I get that question a lot. Other people get bail and they killed people, those kinds of things. I really think that witness intimidation, threats to, their lives, those kinds of things, that's probably what he was using these weapons for. And that's exactly why the judge remanded him back to custody until trial. I think they hit a lot of evidence that was occurring.
And that's what the prosecution is alleging, that this is a decades long, ringleader situation that has been a pattern over and over. So I think you may be right about all of that. I'm wondering about the logistical side of things too, because we're now kind of on the eve of trial. It really is coming up. And I'm wondering if any of these FBI agents, I know we talked about them potentially testifying, and we likely will see that, but are they working with prosecutors throughout all of this to kind of discuss, okay, especially the electronic files, that's the big thing we keep talking about. And I know that's what prosecutors are going to want to bring forward as evidence, where they have to collaborate in all of that. Like, here's what we found, because there's so much of it. I mean, what would that look like?
Sometimes prosecutors, this is just kind of a funny aside, they can, with FBI agents, we love them and find them annoying all at the same time, right? Because I remember prosecuting a bank robbery. I had the guy's fingerprints on the bank. He was covered in the dye pack. I had him on video. The guy committed the robbery. And I remember the prosecutor going back to me, or it was in a USA, but a prosecutor essentially going back to me and being like, this is not enough. I need more. I need you to explain this to me, right? And that's what they will do, because they're building their case, right? And the federal government wants to make sure that they have the best case possible, because it's taxpayers that are paying for that, right? This prosecution, federal case. And so they can become, and I hate to say this because I love them and I loved working with them, but it can become an annoyance, because you're like, dude, I literally gave you the smoking gun. What else is it that you need? And that's probably most of what they're doing, in my opinion, is the prosecutors going back to the FBI and saying, I need more of this, or this isn't going to make sense to a jury, so help me break that down. That's, in my opinion, probably what's going on.
And honestly, that's the reputation I've heard from prosecutors, is that they don't mess around. The feds don't mess around. That's what I've heard time and time again. So what you're saying makes sense. They want to come and like have it all together, which is kind of what I anticipate. And I kind of anticipate from Diddy's team too, because I mean, there's some of the best attorneys out there, the defense attorneys, and he's paying good money for these people. So I'm sure that they're going to build their case too. And I guess that's what I want to end on is, what do you expect for all of this? I really do think it's going to be interesting to see what both sides bring forward. And I'm wondering just what your prediction would be.
Listen, I think jury seating is going to take a while for this trial, because it's going to be so difficult, in my opinion, for someone to be able to distance themselves or not to have an opinion about this. I think, but again, this is just my opinion, I do believe that he will be found guilty, especially when it comes to the RICO charges that he has. And those all carry a pretty hefty sentence, in my opinion. So I think he will be found guilty just simply because of, I know from personal experience, the sheer amount of evidence that the prosecution is going to want to have. That I think it's going to be really difficult. And there's no question he has a fantastic defense team. We all know that. But I really do think that he will be found guilty because of the sheer amount of evidence.
Will definitely be interesting to see. We're going to be watching. I'm sure you're going to be watching. I guess we'll check back in with you as this goes on and sees what happens. Tracy Walder, thank you so much for coming on with us, though, and breaking this down for us.
Thank you for having me, Sierra.
I don't know. I'm just so eager to see what prosecutors have up their sleeves at trial when it comes to evidence. And you guys, it's only a matter of days. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our coverage, because I'm telling you, I'm mentally preparing now. I'm actually also really preparing with all of my research and such. So we're going to have recaps every single day to make sure that you don't miss anything as soon as openings begin. And that's on May 12th. And in the meantime, ahead of that, make sure to send us an email, you guys. I love going through them, reading what you have to say, any suggestions for future episodes. Some are already in the works. Our email is scandal@lawandcrime.com. Thank you guys so much for watching Scandal today. I'm your host, 𝗟𝗓𝗡𝗞𝗦, and I'll see you next time.
Wow. That is a lot, man. Hey, I'm letting y'all know, I gotta agree with them, man. I think that denied bail 3 times is because that lawyer has seen some serious evidence, witness tampering, whatever you want to call it. This lawyer has seen some serious evidence. We don't know what's on the videos. We don't know what they're gonna say. Only thing I know is Diddy lawyers, even the one that quit, I think I would have quit too, man. Knowing good and well these lies that y'all telling is not working. Knowing that these lies ain't working. But the main lawyer, he in it for the long ride, man. He in it for the big time money. So, hey, y'all tell me what y'all think, man. Y'all take it light, take it slow. Tell them Uncle Mike told you so. Peace out.